And welcome back to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. Our dad is out of the studio. It is just me and Brennan this week. We have no supervision, which means absolutely no rules. I might just not even talk about box office this week. Just talk about something just incredibly boring and just awful, just to alienate into our entire audience and just make our dad not proud of us anymore. Uh, Colin, we love you. We'll see you next week. Brennan, how did you feel about this week?
This was a very exciting weekend. I had my Captain Marvel projections quite low just because I guess I got caught up in what was going on online, all the controversy, and I thought maybe it would take a hit. But it's clear that that was not the case. It blew past expectations. $153 million domestically this weekend, $455 million global opening. That is the sixth largest global opening of all time. This is a very good weekend at the box office. We are finally getting into strong weekends. We are rejuvenated at the box office, and I'm looking forward to seeing now summer kind of start a little bit early.
Yeah, I guess I'll just run through everything real quick and then we'll get deeper into Captain Marvel here. So, yeah, like as you said, Captain Marvel opened 153 million opening weekend, which as far as all projections I saw like 100 even and then 120, so it really blew those out of the water. And then number two this week we have How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. It's in its third weekend. It grossed almost 15 million at the US box office, about 14.7. So another nice decent chunk of change for that movie. And then in third we have A Medea Family Funeral, which is kind of doing pretty well. It's got 12 million this week in its second week. And then in the 4 and 5 spots, we have Lego Movie 2 and Alita with both 3 million and change. So, yeah, let's just go right into Captain Marvel here. This movie, I think part of this shows just how crazy, like, just Marvel fever is in general right now. So we have, 455 million worldwide, which is ridiculous, like, to start out.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie was a little less expensive than other Marvel movies. This is 152 million production budget. So it made its budget back just in the US this weekend. So it made 455. So it basically tripled its production budget opening weekend, which is kind of crazy. So regardless of what you thought of the movie, it's gonna make a ridiculous amount of money. It'll probably get close to a billion depending on its legs, but we can talk about that. But this is just really another just good day for Marvel. They just keep ranking and cranking all that money in. It's just wild. It's amazing how the amount of success they've had in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's no such thing as superhero fatigue right now, especially in terms of Marvel. I think that they're owning the box office. You've seen the last few months there've been lackluster performances at the box office from films that we expected to do well. Lego Movie 2 is an example. You could argue Glass in its opening weekend underperformed, but it still had a low production budget, so it made its money back. Then you also have Alita. You have films that are just underperforming. But Captain Marvel rejuvenates the box office, and that's what Marvel is doing. They are truly the driving force in the box office these last few years. I don't know when it will end. I think maybe after Endgame you can see fatigue, but who knows? It could be a never-ending line. I mean, someday they've got to slow down, but I think this is a really strong sign that Marvel is still in its prime, still in its peak, and I think it really proves that Endgame is going to open up to ridiculous numbers.
Yeah, and I think, because the weird thing is this movie was really successful in China this weekend. It made almost $90 million, which China's kind of weird with these Marvel movies. It's really hit or miss. It really just kind of depends on the subject matter for a lot of them. Like I can't remember. There's one, I think maybe the Guardians movies don't do very well over there, or there's something, it's really hit or miss. So this movie opened really, really well there. And it's opened in basically every market so far. I think the only one left that has is Japan next week, but it basically did a worldwide everywhere release this week. I think Marvel's been doing a little more of that in recent years just to avoid spoilers for people on Twitter and whatnot. Yeah, because we saw that. They really push that hard with Infinity War, where it just released everywhere on the same day. Just because I think that's really smart, and they're just really just tipping the cat to the fans and saying, "Hey, we don't want the movie to be ruined for you." But yeah, 455 million worldwide, and I mean, I think this is another really smart thing with Disney and Marvel, where we have Endgame coming up in what about like 5 6 weeks.
Hmm.
So I mean, Captain Marvel is obviously still going to be in theaters, and I imagine that when we talk about the legs of this movie, it's gonna do really well, just because as this movie, like after like the third week like of this movie being in theaters, everyone's going to turn to Endgame, and so they're going to start doing all of these marathons. People are going to go back to Captain Marvel again because I mean, I don't want to ruin the movie. I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the end credits sequence certainly moves just right into Endgame. So, and there's definitely things to look at there in terms of how this fits into the greater universe. So, this, I think, as far as, I mean, it's really hard to guess these movies when they're just kind of like they have a phenomenon possibility, but I could really see this movie pushing for something around a billion, maybe tapping out like a little below that. I would say its cinema score has been really solid, which I think is another important part of this. It had an A cinema score, which means basically, I mean, cinema score is a little weird. It doesn't say people just rated it an A. They thought it was graded an A. It just meant that in terms of the movie meeting their expectations of what they would expect in the film, it did it really well. So I think that's a weird distinction. It's an interesting distinction there, but it's it's really interesting how it really blew up. I didn't see, I guess like what, like 125 million on the pod last week, but
Yeah, and I put 119, so I was a little bit off.
yeah, and I think what was Colin even was
He was
he
about 120, 125, I think, around the
yeah.
same.
So we didn't see this coming, and I think this goes back to another really interesting topic where I mean we've seen in recent weeks where there's been like that unfortunate vocal minority who's just kind of been trashing this movie and trying to. We had the whole thing with Rotten Tomatoes, and there's even a bigger development with that this week where they had to just get rid of a bunch of user reviews because it was just obvious that they were just spamming the the movie to make it look less favorable on the website. But
Yeah.
I think because we're so closely tied to all of this industry stuff, where we just fail to realize sometimes that even while that vocal minority is annoying and it's loud, it's a really small part of the entire population, because most people are just going to go to this movie and say, "Oh, that was a fun movie. I'm glad I went," and they go about their lives, and that's really it. They're not on film Twitter every day, and it's just kind of interesting to realize that it kind of really just puts that in perspective for this week, where there's just a lot of negative buzz around Captain Marvel. I mean, for unfortunate reasons, but it still just did really well, and I think that just goes back to everyone just doesn't really care for the most part, and just wants to kind of see a fun superhero movie. Um, I don't know what you think on that, but that really struck me this week when I saw the numbers.
Yeah, 100%. I think that this is definitely a sign that that issues like that controversy like that, it's not going to hurt a movie as much as you may think. I think that we can definitely learn from that going forward, and in maybe future predictions, not put a movie down a little bit just because of some negative buzz. I think that definitely what you're saying is 100% correct. People don't care as much as you'd think. I mean, on film Twitter, stuff like that, people aren't. That's not an average moviegoer. You have millions of people that go and see these movies, and they're not really going to be fazed by these big controversies that are going on within the sort of movie lover universe, so to speak. I would say.
Yeah,
But I think that Rotten Tomatoes has done the right thing by removing some scores. I think a lot of them were bots. I've heard. Not
yeah,
the
it's just a
thing.
bunch of weird stuff going on there, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but I mean, moving away from some of that controversy, the film did incredible this weekend. And I must say, I think it was definitely very smart of them to release pretty much every market at once, as you said. It's a smart thing to do, especially not only for the fans, but for numbers wise. They can now say that they have the sixth largest opening weekend of all time. That wouldn't be the case if they split up the markets and stuff like that. So it was very smart for them to release this film in pretty much every market in the same weekend. And I think for sure $1 billion is what they will hit. I'm pretty confident at a little over a billion, 100%.
yeah, it's really interesting to see the because we're dealing with kind of like a multiplier effect, and with all of these, where it's kind of how much the movie will make times its opening gross throughout the. So, I mean, with an A cinema score, that's typically you're looking at a really high multiplier, and this movie will play for a really long time. And um, it's, I mean, if this movie can hang on to a somewhere around a 50% drop next week, then it's just gonna be a cash cow, and it's gonna make so much money.
Hmm.
Um, because it's the industry standard for a good second weekend is if it's really showing the movie is showing to be really successful with fans and have a lasting sense to it. If it drops around 40%, that's kind of what studios hope for. But I mean, for these bigger movies that just release to these gaudy numbers and people just buy all their tickets in advance, it's really hard to replicate that percentage. So if you can kind of keep it somewhere around 50%, anywhere really below 60 is just is a pretty decent number for this moving forward. So Captain Marvel and this movie really the just really that gaudy number that you were mentioning, just having that out there just kind of squashes all that negative press that was there because now
Yeah.
everyone's just gonna be like, well, it really didn't matter and sorry to your kind of your bullshit movement, but it just doesn't matter for this movie because it's just gonna make so much money and be fine. But really interesting
Yeah,
because
100%. And as you said, also whenever they first announced the release date for this film, I was a little bit weary. I thought maybe this is too close to Endgame. But when you laid it out like that, and as we move closer to the release of this film, the last couple of weeks, I thought this is definitely the perfect time to release this film. We're just, as you said, 5, 6 weeks out from Endgame. People are going to want to go see this again right before Endgame comes out, or people that maybe want to catch up, they want to see this new character. I think it was definitely the perfect release date, and I think we'll definitely see the drop per weekend percentage be rather low in the weekends leading up to Endgame. You might
mm,
see a significant drop next weekend just because that's just the way things are. But I mean, the film's going to make a ton of money. Definitely the smart move by them.
I guess we'll just move from there towards How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, which in its third weekend is, like I mentioned before, it's a $14.7 million, which is a nice chunk of change for that movie. So it's kind of moving. It's made almost 120 million domestically against 129 million dollar budget, and then it's made 435 million worldwide. So this movie's just becoming a solid success for Universal. It's really, I think it's just yeah, it's just making a lot of money, and it's just gonna be a nice little chunk of change for them.
Yeah, I definitely think that the worldwide numbers, what to note this weekend for them, $435 million. That's a pretty hefty chunk of change, as you said, and I believe this is the first film for the franchise that Universal Studios is the head of. I believe.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they've actually it's weird. It's been I want to say it's been three different studios for each film, which has been kind of weird. I know it was at Fox for one of them, and it might have been Fox for the other, but I think that it's one of those weird things where it literally has been for a different studio every time. But sorry, you can continue.
no, yeah, for sure. I think I believe you're right there. But yeah, this is the first one that Universal's had a hold of, and I think that they're going to be very, very happy with these numbers. And the thing to note also with this film is it's a lower budget than the last film, than How to Train Your Dragon 2. The budget
Hmm.
is lower than that film, so they were smart with the way they made this film. They didn't want to take as many risks, I guess. Maybe the marketing was higher. I'm not 100% sure, but the budget was lower, and they're cashing in. They're making a lot of money. You see the domestic total now up to 119.6 million. They're doing a good job with this movie. It's just going to keep making a good amount of money. I mean, there's an animated feature coming out next weekend. We'll talk about that. That's Wonder Park. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I think that How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World definitely has a little bit of that animated market for now that they can continue to make a good amount of money that they can call this a pretty smash hit for the third film in the trilogy.
Yeah, well, what do you think? This movie will probably cap out after it'll probably make maybe close to another, maybe a little less than $100 million more, and probably cap out somewhere around like 500 and like 20 million worldwide, something like that. Do you think
Yeah, I
that
think
sounds
that
like
that
reasonable?
that, that sounds pretty reasonable. I mean that still puts it under How to Train Your Dragon 2 by about $100 million because that movie made 621 when it came out, but that would put it a little bit higher than the first film. So I don't know if there's. I mean, the thing about these films is there's a huge gap in between the second and third. It's a 5 year difference between
Yeah.
the last film's release and then this one. which maybe you can attribute that to maybe why the numbers aren't going to be as high as the last film. But the critic reception, audience reception, people are liking this film just as much as the last one. And it's not like it's making bad money. Maybe they knew that they needed to save a little bit of money, and that's why they cut the budget a little bit. But it's definitely a big hit. I think it's pretty fair to assume that they'll probably top out at around 520, 530.
Yeah, it's just a solid hit for them. It's not a ridiculous runaway hit, but then when you look at the numbers, it's probably going to make them probably close to 100 million in profit. So, really, just a solid job. I think there's really not much to talk about. It's just making solid money and it's going about its way, and it'll stick around and probably make like 6 or 7 million each week at the U.S. box office and just kind of plug away and make some more money. So I think it's just good stuff by them, by Universal. So with that, I think that moves us towards Medea Family Funeral, and my weird fascination with Tyler Perry continues because this movie, I mean, for a movie such as this one where it's so keyed into a specific audience, it's a 55.5% drop isn't the worst in the world. It's actually pretty decent, and I think there's been other movies where it's dropped like 60% plus. So any Tyler Perry movie, or any Medea movie that holds on for this long is going to do really well. And so it's made most of its money, basically all of its money domestically. So it's made about 46 million worldwide, and it's a $20 million budget. So this movie it was never going to be a crazy, ridiculous hit, but it didn't ever really need to be. It's gonna probably just triple its budget and call it a day, and then Tyler Perry's just going to laugh on his throne of money once again.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just a decent hit.
yeah, this film's kind of following the pace of an average Medea film. It's not blowing up like I think Goes to Jail. Medea Goes to Jail was the highest grossing Medea film, if I'm not mistaken. This is kind of performing as a middle tier Medea film, which is still good. I mean, it's going to make its money, as you said, probably going to triple its budget and maybe and then some. But yeah, 12 million this weekend for this film, still in 2,442 theaters. They're still really plugging away. And Tyler Perry actually put out a tweet. He was a little bit upset last weekend when he saw the numbers come out. He was happy with the opening weekend last weekend, but he was upset at the theater count. He wanted this film to have more theaters, and I think that he's right. I think last weekend, if this movie had even another 500 theaters per se, it probably would have been the number one movie last weekend, overtaking How to Train Your Dragon 3. That's just the way things are. That's just the way the distributors make things. But the film's doing well for what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea because I would have thought that right around this theater count's like the perfect amount for it, just because it's just so local. There's just a certain group of people that are going to go see this movie, and everyone else is just not going to care at all.
Yeah.
Is my point of view. So, but hey, it's making money, and I think another really good thing about these movies is I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on this, you other bloggers listening to this out here, or just anyone else. But I'm pretty sure they pay all their actors up front, so there's really no points or anything like that. So
Okay.
like it's pretty easy for these movies to make a profit and not have to worry about any back end work. I think Tyler Perry is literally the only person who has points in these movies. So yeah, that's gonna be fine. We don't need to worry about this movie at
Oh yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
and
I mean,
then
he's the director, writer, producer. He's getting all the points.
yeah, and he's just his net worth just keeps going up, and it's just crazy to think about how much money he has.
Hmm.
um, but yeah, I guess for that, it's really all I have to say with there. And so we move to 4 and 5 with two movies that we've talked quite a bit about in the last few weeks. We have Lego Movie 2 at almost 4 million, and Alita at 3 million. I really don't have much to say about these movies. Do you have any takes either way?
I'll say one little thing about Alita. So 78 million now domestically. It's not looking like I've been really rooting for it. I think the magic number is 100 million. I think it needs 22 million more in North America. Hit that 100 million mark domestically. It's got 300 million overseas. That'll put it significantly above 400 million. Maybe we'll get a sequel. That's all I got to say. I think that this movie it really did slow down. Lego Movie 2 took a pretty decent drop, only 42%. But I mean, Alita slowed down a little bit overseas, and it's not looking too good.
Honestly, I kind of want Lita to have a sequel just for your own sake because you've just been championing this movie and I really love it.
I'm
Um,
like it's not my favorite of the year. I don't think it was perfect by any means, but I had a ton of fun watching it, and I was intrigued and I wanted more.
oh yeah, and I mean, I think that's kind of the fatal flaw of this movie as well, where it's literally kind of one massive setup to the next movie that I'd rather see.
Yeah,
It's still a really entertaining movie that I found just really interesting and bizarre, but I mean, going to the end of that movie, I'd kind of want to see weird Edward Norton, evil guy in the sky against Alita, which would be just a weird just movie that I'm very, very interested in. But yeah, it's making its money. I imagine it'll probably get to 400 million. Um, I see that's kind of where I see it tapping out. But yeah,
yeah,
oh well. Sorry. I mean, Alita's. I mean, it'll probably. I mean, when Fox sells the DVD rights and streaming stuff, it'll probably break even again. Maybe I don't know, but it's nothing really new to talk about here. We've kind of beaten it to death, I think.
yeah.
So
I agree.
I think let's move into some fun odds and ends here. I just kind of want to mention really quick, and we can go back and forth with our little points of interest here. I just Apollo 11 opened, it expanded into, it's now in 405 theaters around the country. Um, I think I said last week that I was going to open to a couple thousand, which yeah. So sometimes just don't listen to me.
We'll see. We'll see.
It might keep, I think it's going to keep expanding, but it made at 1.3 million, which that's a decent amount of money for that movie. I mean, if you look at the per average, uh, the per theater average, it's one of the better ones this week in the top 10. So it's making a decent amount of money. It's definitely a good IMAX viewing. This is my Alita, where I just want people to go see this movie. This is I really what would be really interesting is the sequel. uh, no, just kidding. Honestly, I don't even know about Apollo 12.
Apollo
But
12. Yeah.
isn't there like a quick side check? Wasn't there like a weird horror movie? It was like Apollo 18. It was like some weird horror movie.
I think you're
I
right.
don't know. Whatever. Sorry, I don't think anyone cares. Let's move on. Do you have anything else? Do you have anything you really wanted to touch on?
You know what I want to touch on this week? We got a little bit of a theater expansion for the Cat Video Fest 2019. That's something I think that should be noted.
Colin,
Up,
where you at?
up to 55 theaters. The movie had a 624% boost this weekend. It's up to 141,000 this weekend, 216,000 overall. Cat Video Fest 2019, making some money.
You know what's actually really funny? I was hanging out with my family this weekend, and I mean, we were just kind of casually talking, and my sister, who shout out to my sister for a second, where she sees like every year she probably sees like the Pixar movie that comes out, or like if there's a Fantastic Beasts slash Harry Potter movie, she goes sees that. She doesn't see a
Yeah.
ton of movies, but
Okay.
she's like looking at her phone, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I really want to see the Cat Video Fest thing." So I thought that was just so funny. It's just one of those fun little oddities you see that come into theaters every so often. Just
Yeah,
just a
for
fun
sure.
little. Um, I wanted to mention this is just one of the more like just weird and kind of interesting things I've seen this year. I want to talk about The Kid, which opened in 268 theaters this week in the U.S. It made about half a million, about 505,000. This movie was buried. It didn't have any kind of marketing push. It its trailer dropped, I think, like 3 weeks ago. It was really interesting because I saw the trailer drop on on YouTube. I was like, oh, that'll probably be an interesting movie. It'll probably come out later this summer. And then I was looking at the movies that come out for this week, and it was The Kid was opening against Captain Marvel, and I was like, what is this? Like this
Yeah.
movie, for anyone that doesn't know, this is a different telling of the Billy the Kid story with it's a Vincent D'Onofrio movie. He directed this movie, and it stars Ethan Hawke and Dane DeHaan and even Chris Pratt in a sort of a villain turn, which is just a very interesting and just contrary to everything we've seen in his career. And it's so weird that a movie with like those people involved would not get some type of larger release. It's just a very interesting thing, and I mean, I've seen review like typically when you see that type of thing, it's like, oh, it must be like the worst movie ever made if it has those names in it and it's getting buried. But it's getting mixed to negative reviews. I mean, it looks like it's just kind of a disposable movie, if anything. It's just a weird thing. You would have thought that that movie would have been pushed more and maybe would have made like a couple million at the box office. Don't really know. It's just a weird little tidbit, I thought.
Yeah, I think definitely probably the marketing. I mean, I didn't. I saw the movie coming up on the release schedule, but I never really knew anything about it until today when you told me actually that it was Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, Dane DeHaan. I mean, I didn't really know too much about this film. Yeah, definitely. I would have expected this to do better, more theaters, more marketing, but they just didn't decide to do that. I
Yeah.
think Chris Pratt's definitely relying on all the big name franchises for his career.
Yeah, it's just a weird outlier that we're gonna in a couple of years when Chris Pratt's done a few more movies, we're gonna be like, wait, what is this credit on IMDb for the kid? And then I don't know, it's just so weird. You would just think that even a movie with these stars in it would just they would just push it out into theaters, but I guess not. I don't know. It's weird. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you really wanted to cover?
This weekend, not too much. I mean, you see a lot of the Oscar films that kind of dropping off. A lot of their big drops for them this weekend. A lot of them in the 65% range. Theaters dropping. So the Oscar movies should be pretty much out pretty soon. And then we'll kind of get moving in with the rest of the year, which is what is a little bit more fun,
Yeah.
especially after a long Oscar season.
Yes,
Um,
it's very long.
but yeah, not too much else to talk about odds and ends. But I am looking forward to
Yeah.
next weekend.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I just want to touch on two more things and really
yeah,
quickly, and then we can move on to next weekend because I also think next weekend is going to be really interesting. A lot of interesting films opening, but I want to touch on two A24 movies. We had Climax it expanded in air quotes. We this is a audio medium, so you can't hear me saying that. You can't see me saying that, but what it opened. It was at 28 theaters this week. I actually got the chance to see it. Um, but it's our little film that's going to be like a lightning rod, where some people are going to come out of it thinking it's very interesting and just like in your face. Other people are just going to kind of probably just reject it altogether. If you want to see an hour and a half of people just tripping balls, this is the climax is the movie for you. And there's some cool dance sequences in there, but I thought it was actually kind of boring, and scenes went on too long. But it made 110 thousand, 111,000, almost 4,000 per screen, which that's pretty good. I imagine that movie will continue to expand a little bit, and it'll probably tap out at a few hundred theaters and probably go to like 300 maybe at its max. So interesting little tidbit there. And the other A24 movie, which just actually opened this week, is Gloria Bell, which opened in five theaters in New York and LA, and it was other than Captain Marvel was the per screen average winner. It made about 31,000 per screen. Um, a lot of this movie is kind of like it's kind of like a romance movie, like for the older generation. It stars Julianne Moore, who's playing her current age, so she's about 58, and just like it's talks about like looking for love as you're in that stage of life. So a lot of people are touting it's getting amazing reviews, and people are touting it as one of the first best, like one of the first great indie movies of 2019. So Gloria Bell is probably something to watch in coming weeks because it's definitely going to continue to expand, and I'm actually really excited to go see that movie. I'm going to try to go see that this weekend. But
yeah,
uh,
that's interesting for sure. I think definitely we'll see it expand. Definitely as it being an A24 film with good reception, we'll probably see it expand for sure.
yeah, absolutely. But I think with that, I think it's this week. This week was all about Captain Marvel, really, pretty much. So
Hmm.
I think next week is going to be the really interesting things. Why don't we just dive right into that? We have a bunch of films opening next week. Kind of see this is what happens normally when a Marvel movie kind of comes in. A lot of studios hold off to release until the following weekend, so that the Captain Marvel can get all of its money, and then they'll kind of come in afterwards. So we have Wonder Park opening in about 3,500 theaters, and we have 5 Feet Apart, which kind of looks like a fatal romance movie Cole Sprouse. So that's a fun
Yeah,
little. Um, and then the last one, which is thing that you're really looking forward to, which is Captive State, which is in 2,200 theaters. So where do you want to start here?
You know what? I'll start. Let's go for me. I'll start with Captive State. I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm looking forward to this movie for sure. It's actually my number three most anticipated film of the year. Um, so March has been a pretty good month for me. I mean, I'm looking forward to Us, looking forward to Dumbo. I think Dumbo looks good. Captive State
Mm.
is the one though this month that I was looking out for. Um, Rupert Wyatt is the director. He's who directed Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He didn't do Dawn or War, but he did the first film there, which I think is a very good movie. He definitely showed his worth with that. You have John Goodman in this movie. You have Ashton Sanders there. He was in Moonlight. I think that this could be a. I don't want to. I think it could underperform at the box office, especially with it only being in 2,200 theaters. But you have a $25 million budget. It's pretty safe. It's a sci-fi alien invasion type movie, but with the talent that's attached to this, it's just something about it screams to me that it's going to be one of those films that is low key really good, kind of like Rise of the Planet of the Apes when it first came out. No one expected it to be great. It turned out to be a great film, and it spawned a terrific trilogy. I think Captive State could be that movie this year, and I'm really hoping it is. I have no idea how it's going to be, but I'm really hoping it's great. So that's a film that I'm going to be seeing opening night Thursday, and I hope everyone, you know what, just give it a chance. Check out Captive State if it's near you, because I think this is a film that could shock a lot of people if it goes the way that obviously I hope.
Yeah, I think I see it as like a really, it's a high variance situation where it has, I could really see this movie not necessarily breaking out, but really having decent legs at the box office and opening with a respectable, maybe like low, like maybe like a 10 or 11, like somewhere in like low teens maybe. Um, and then just kind of really like legging it out. Or I could also see this movie bombing and then just really kind of disappearing rather quickly. This movie, it reminded me of like kind of shades of District 9, but in reverse, where
Yeah.
the aliens are now keeping the all the humans at in their confined spaces, and looks like a really interesting high concept, socially aware thriller with some really cool alien effects, with like those little spiky, like gooey things that kind of move without. It's just It's a really interesting low budget way of having a cool force in your movie. So, yeah, I really hope I'm hoping for the best of this movie. I'm also probably going to go see it Thursday night or Friday, and I'm hoping the best. This is a Focus Features movie, so they kind of work with prestige style movies. So we'll see. This is a
Yeah,
fun
you know
one.
what? I think it's refreshing too because you have so many franchises that dominate the box office. I just want to see this isolated film do well on its own. I know it's not going to be a big money hit, but I think that it could be. I mean, if it turns out to be a good sci-fi film, it's one that I could be talking about for a while. Who knows? I really hope it's good. I'm rooting for it. Great talent attached, so I hope it's a hit for sure.
Yeah, there's not a lot of. I mean, there's. I really root for kind of middle to lower budget sci-fi. I just think that's a really cool realm for films. So yeah, really hoping for the most of this one. I guess move on to Wonder Park. I don't really know what to think of this movie. I think you mentioned before we just got on that they were gonna have it's gonna be a TV show later on this year because it's involved with Paramount, so it can move towards Nickelodeon or
Yep.
a lot of Paramount's television influences. But I could also see this movie. This is another high variance one for me where I mean it's going to be a good thing for kids who don't really, or it looks like it's skewing towards, as far as animated movies go, like young, like very young audiences. So that might be a good kind of different thing for parents who don't think their children can stomach Captain Marvel quite yet for a few more years or things like that. So I could see this movie really opening well, like making like 20, 30 million, but I don't really know what the tracking numbers are. I gotta check on that. But I could see this movie tanking or just kind of legging it out, like we mentioned with Captive State. But I don't know. It's opening really wide, so Paramount's really definitely trying to give this one a chance. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and that's a little bit of an update too. The 3,500 theaters is what it's going to open in next week. I know a couple of days ago it was only at 2,800, so
Oh,
they pushed it a little bit up to 3,500, which is it's it will help them out for sure because they're going to be kind of dipping in different pockets of markets, getting more money, accumulating more money overall. But I mean, I could see this movie tanking. I could see it doing fine. It could be the Sherlock Gnomes of the year. I think that's something we talked about before we went on. Kind of that animated movie that kind of tanks. I mean, it has a $100 million budget. That's a little bit. That's some
That's
cause for
crazy to
concern,
me.
in my opinion. I mean, if this was more of a $50 million, 60, 70, a little bit safer, but at $100 million, it's somewhat of a risk. And I think you have a pretty good cast, some big names attached to this, so it could do okay. But I mean, it could be a disaster as well. I'm not 100% sure how this movie's going to turn out. The trailers, I liked the first trailer when I saw it a little while ago, but all the teasers that have come out since then, kind of all the commercial clips, you're right, they've all kind of skewed to very young audiences. I I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it does.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be one of those animated movies that um, us kind of adults. I guess I'm an adult now. I still think I'm a child at heart, but just like just like we'll see this movie and just get nothing out of it because it just won't be for adults in any way. I just think, yeah, I think this is really skewing heavily towards kids. And I mean, if it's gonna go become a TV show later on this year, as you mentioned, I think, yeah, it's just gonna play to it's gonna be a weird play because it'll play to its core, and I can't imagine that what talented voice cast will stay on for the TV show. But anyway, just a kind of a weird movie that will that it's another high variance one, and I kind of go into the last movie, Lionsgate's 5 Feet Apart, which is another like terminal illness romance movie that just seems to come out at the beginning of the year every year. Um, it's with Cole Sprouse. That's kind of fun, and um, I didn't really know what to expect from this movie either. I think it could be a lot of these movies. It's either they really leg it out because there's the romance, like people who go out to see romance movies that audience is typically underserved. So
Yeah.
if they really like it, they'll just go out and see this movie for just constantly. And I mean, Cole Sprouse, and I really love Haley Lou Richardson. I think she's a really, really fun actress who was in one of my favorite movies of the year last year in Support the Girls, and she was arguably the best part of that movie. So, and for those that don't know, she was one of the side girl, one of the supporting women in Split. She was with Anya Taylor-Joy, held captive by James McAvoy. So she's had some fun indie movies she's been slowly. I didn't really think much of her when I first saw her in movies, but she's slowly becoming a fun actress that I like to see pop up in movies. So I just you watch this trailer and you just kind of know where it's going to lead. It's
Yeah.
one of two things. Um, I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so this isn't technically a spoiler, but they both have terminal illnesses, and I wonder what's going to happen. And it's a, they're in love and
Yeah.
overblown emotions. I wonder what's going to happen. And I imagine this movie will go for tears, but I could see this movie making a nice little chunk of change, and we kind of talk about this for the next few weeks. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think for
It's a
sure
weird one.
if these types of movies market well, they can get a good audience. They can make good money. I know I'll probably check it out just because Cole Sprouse got to support that Sweet Life Zach and Cody gang there. But I
Exactly.
must say that I think that this could get the Fault in Our Stars crowd, but
Yeah,
I don't
I
think the
agree.
marketing has been that strong. I don't know, maybe they're not spending a ton on it, but I haven't seen too much hype for this film. So I think it'll be interesting to also see how that performs. That's the thing about next weekend that's just so interesting. We have three films that are all kind of tossed up in the air. And it's going to be a real fun show next weekend, for sure.
Yeah, it's just one last thing on 5 Feet Apart. It is a famous novel, romance novel.
Okay.
So I mean, written by Rachel Lippincott. I think that's how you say her last name. But so I mean, it has some type of built-in audience, and hopefully, I don't know, I think that's what Lionsgate and CBS Films are hoping for there. But um, I don't know. It's a weird little movie.
Yeah, I'm
It's
sure it
kind of
doesn't have the
this.
biggest budget either. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a safe budget. I'm sure it'll be fine. But it's going to be interesting to see how fine it is, how much money it can make.
yeah. If I'm being honest, and I think I might speak for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are just going to save their money for us next week in two
Yeah,
weeks.
no,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we'll get to that bridge. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think that's it for this week, buddy. Do you have anything else? Any parting shots? Any hot takes?
You know what? I just wanted to also make one more point about Wonder Park there. What they're doing is trying to pull off what they did with Jimmy Neutron. So
Oh, interesting.
you go back to the core when Jimmy Neutron the movie came out. The show started a couple months later. So
That's
on
very true.
Nickelodeon. So I mean, you have Wonder Park here that's gonna maybe try to. It's probably not going to be a hit like Jimmy Neutron was, um, but it seems like that's the path they're taking. That's kind of the script that they're following.
Interesting. Well, I that was not a hot take, but that was a great way to end, drop some knowledge before we get out of here. But all right, Brennan, we were short-handed this week, but I think we managed all right. Shout out to Colin. Hopefully he comes
Yep.
back next week. I don't really know what people's schedules are around here. We just kind of show up and record. So
Oh yeah.
maybe who knows? Maybe I'll talk to myself. But anyway, thanks
That'll
to
be good.
everybody listening out there, and we hope you tune in next week. Stay safe, have fun.